Hello, one and all. Welcome to another episode of MMA Vision Analysis. This one, I'm here to talk about the upcoming fight for Dricus, champion of the middleweight division. That's the second fight against Sean Strickland, the most obvious opponent for Dricus at this point. But before getting started, make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Click that notification to get all of this that is new from this channel, your channel, the one and only MMA Vision Analysis. UFC 305 is in the history books at this time. Dricus defeated Israel Adesanya, former middleweight champion, the last style bender. I said this immediately after the fight. I said that for a guy like Dricus to defeat Israel Adesanya, it means just as much as winning the title. I really do believe in that. I believe that 20, 30 years down the line, Dricus, looking back in retrospect, will be very proud of his win against last style bender Israel Adesanya, the greatest striker. I'm going to go ahead and say that in the UFC currently still. Even after his losses to Strickland and Dricus, takes nothing away from last style bender. It just means that those guys are that good. That being said, obviously Dricus won the title when he defeated Sean Strickland. Earlier this year, 2024, he defended the title. I wouldn't imagine that Dricus will be back in the octagon by the end of this year. I could be wrong, but the next and most obvious opponent for Dricus, current middleweight champion, is obviously Sean Strickland, former middleweight champion, which would make the second fight between the two. Obviously, Strickland had to get through Costa first, and there was a lot of things that could have went wrong for Sean Strickland. He could have been matched up against, one other person before he got to a title. But at this point, it's inevitable that Sean Strickland is up next for that title, unless something strange happens. And what I mean by something strange is that, injuries or what have you. If no injuries occurs on both sides, then we are promised to see this fight, if not the end of this year, 2024, it's going to be sometime, let's say around March of 2025, for the title in that middleweight division between Strickland and Plessis. This is going to be an interesting fight between two second time around. Obviously, I believe that Dricus was able to defeat Strickland first time around via takedowns. He just landed a lot more takedowns. But in terms of striking, these two are very equally matched. They hurt each other equally, I believe. Striking, standing up, that is. But most certainly, when it comes to takedown attempts and takedowns landed, it was certainly on Dricus' side. Matter of fact, if you guys go back and rewatch the fight between Dricus and Strickland, you would notice that Dricus was shooting for takedown last minute of every single round. Very, very calculated Dricus. Obviously, very awkward style to deal with. Very difficult to get reads on. And ultimately makes him very hard to beat. You could just go ahead and ask Whitaker. You can ask Strickland. And you can ask Israel Adesanya. Strickland did express in a recent interview that Dricus does not want to fight him. He'd rather fight Whitaker instead. Personally, I don't think Dricus is necessarily shying away from Sean Strickland. I just think it's more suitable to fight a guy like Whitaker just because of proximity for that particular event. What I mean by that, we have a guy, if I'm not mistaken, Robert Whitaker is from Down Under, that's Australia, and obviously South African champion Dricus. South Africa and Australia, some geography, are a bit closer than what the States is to South Africa. So when Strickland says that, oh, Dricus trying to avoid him, I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think Dricus is so calculated that he's even thinking about proximity when he's thinking about his opponents. I believe that the fight that happened in Perth was perfect for Dricus, in all honesty, because I would assume that the travel time is not quite the same as it was if he had to travel to the States. Let's say that's a 13, 14-hour flight. I'm not sure South Africa to Australia. I'm really not sure, but I would assume it's going to be less distance to cover via plane, less travel, and I would assume that the time difference is not as big. It doesn't have as big of a gap as it does between the States and, say, South Africa. But I don't agree that Dricus is afraid to face Strickland. That is, I don't want to say foolish from Strickland to say. It's crazy to say that, in all honesty. But I think Dricus is thinking more proximity. Now, that being said, how will a second fight between the two go? In all honesty, standing up, these two were like two entities of equal force colliding into one another. And at times, it was kind of, they were so equally matched, standing up, that is, that it kind of became like, just like I said, it's like two equal forces colliding against one another, which does make the fight kind of not the easiest fight to watch. Let's just say that. There's definitely, in terms of entertainment in fights, there's definitely, bigger, better fights out there for Dricus to be had. Personally speaking, when we're talking about Dricus and Sean Strickland, we're not talking about the flashiest fighters in that middleweight division, yet they are very effective and consistent indeed. Dricus, Sean Strickland, 2. No official data as of yet, but we can draw distinctions between the two. I believe inside the octagon, they are very equally matched. Just go back and watch the first fight between the two. You will see that standing up, these two were like two equal forces colliding into one another. But Dricus was able to get the upper hand via takedowns, and there was that cut that Sean Strickland suffered. That being said, there are certain attributes that these two have that we can draw like distinctions, which help us draw distinctions between the two. First and foremost, I look at Dricus as the more focused fighter on his craft. I talked a lot about Strickland even prior to him losing the title to Dricus. I believe Strickland, after winning the title, became super distracted. Spent a lot of time on the internet. At some point, when the guy first won the title, it seems like he was on everybody's YouTube channel, whether it be interviewing, cracking jokes, and just kind of enjoying his championship title, which did not ultimately last for a long time. But we have a guy like Strickland, who was very, very, I believe, distracted during his time as champion. I don't think he said no to any news media outlet that asked him for an interview during those times. And there were strange things that were happening for Strickland, like some of the strange things that I found very, for me, strange, let's just leave it at that, is the fact that Strickland was sparring non-fighters, specifically YouTubers, guys that he can probably literally beat with one hand tied behind his back. I knew that those weren't good signs, the moment these things were unfolding, just because that came across to me as if Strickland was not focused on the upcoming task, which is Dricus. So that's the major distinction between the two. I believe that Dricus is just a much more focused fighter. Dricus, on the other hand, obviously had the call out from Alex Pereira. I don't think the latter would go back down to 185. I really doubt it. But Dricus climbing up to light heavyweight is a very, very feasible idea. Matter of fact, I think he would be a good light heavyweight, in all honesty. I would not be opposed to seeing Alex Pereira versus Dricus in the light heavyweight division, but I'm not a big fan of seeing Alex Pereira suffer to make 185 again. There were stories that were told about him making weight and how, let's just say, it's very difficult for some of those guys to cut the weight, which, as the great Joe Rogan always puts it, it's like the finest form of cheating. It's just plain cheating. I mean, if that's the case, let's just go ahead and have no weight classes and just have fighters fight each other. Because sometimes you see ginormous guys fight at lighter weight classes. And I've said this about the middleweight division. Guys that fight in the middleweight division, a lot of them go on to fight in higher weight classes. The likes of light heavyweight and heavyweight division. I think it's very feasible to see Alex Pereira heavyweight division sometime in the near future. The 37 years old. Now, Dricus, Strickland, this fight is going to be interesting. Who will this fight favor? I want to say the more focused fighter, and I explained who would be the more focused fighter out of the two. This is not me choosing one side over the other. This is just plain obvious. I think Dricus is just much more focused fighter than Sean Strickland. I believe Sean Strickland's lack of focus cost him his title. He did not hold that title for long. And how would a second fight between the two go? It's very interesting for me to see, but I would have to kind of lean a bit more towards the quote-unquote focused fighter, which in this case would be Dricus. He just defeated Stylebender, for God's sake. If you made it this far, I appreciate you for sticking around. Please let me know what you think in the comments and like, subscribe for more.